You have heard the number before, $1,700,000. That is what people say you need saved before you can retire in Canada without ever running out of money. But that number is missing something big. It is missing the $40,477.56 a year the government is already set up to pay you through CPP, OAS, and GIS combined. For a single retiree starting at 65 in 2026, the maximum CPP payment is $1,507.65 a month. Add the maximum OAS payment of $742.31 a month, and you are already at $2,249.96 a month before you have touched a single dollar of your own savings. That works out to close to $27,000 a year, guaranteed, indexed to inflation, for as long as you live. If your income is low enough to qualify for GIS on top of that, your floor climbs past $40,000 a year, and in many cases it is close to tax-free. I want you to sit with that for a second, because most people never do the math on their own guaranteed income before they panic about a lump sum. In this video, I am going to walk you through exactly how to calculate your own income floor and why your real retirement number is probably far lower than the headline you have been shown. If you leave now, you will keep chasing a figure that was never built for your actual situation. If you are a Canadian who has been told you need $1,700,000 and you have felt hopeless looking at your own savings, hit subscribe. I am going to walk you through the real numbers that apply to your life, not a scare statistic built to sell you something. Here is the floor laid out in full. Maximum CPP at 65 in 2026 is $1,507.65 a month. Maximum OAS is $742.31 a month. Together, that is $2,249.96 a month, or $26,999.52 a year, for a single retiree with a full contribution and residency history. Add the maximum GIS payment of $1,123.17 a month for a low-income single retiree, and the total climbs to $3,373.13 a month, or $40,477.56 a year. That is the income the government guarantees before you draw a single dollar from your own savings. There's a variable most retirement calculators leave out entirely. That $1,700,000 number assumes you are starting from zero, as if CPP, OAS, and GIS do not exist. They are not a bonus sitting on top of your plan. They are the base of it. Once you build your budget on top of that floor instead of ignoring it, the size of the nest egg you actually need drops fast, sometimes by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Think about what $40,477.56 a year actually covers before you touch your savings at all. In a paid-off, modest household, that is enough most months to cover property tax, hydro, groceries, and a car insurance renewal without pulling a single dollar from an investment account. Most people never run this comparison, and that is not laziness. Financial media and some advisors make more sense as a story when the number is enormous and frightening. A giant, scary lump sum gets attention. A modest, manageable gap does not. The real calculation works backward. You start with what you will actually spend, subtract your guaranteed government income, and only then figure out what your own savings need to cover. I have watched people sit down and run this exact math for the first time, then visibly relax once the floor is sitting there in black and white. If you are looking at $300,000 saved and feeling behind, you are not behind. You are looking at the wrong side of the ledger. Most Canadian retirees are never going to see anything close to $1,700,000, and most of them are still going to be fine, because CPP, OAS, and GIS are doing far more of the heavy lifting than anyone gives them credit for. This is where it gets specific to you. That $40,477.56 floor is not the same for everyone. Your actual CPP depends on how many years you worked and how much you earned. Your OAS depends on how many years you lived in Canada after turning 18. So instead of talking in maximums, let's look at how this plays out for one kind of retiree and see what the math actually looks like once you plug in his numbers. Instead of starting with one enormous number that is supposed to cover everything, flip the order. Start with your income floor, the guaranteed money from CPP, OAS, and GIS. Then subtract that from what you actually expect to spend each year in retirement. Whatever is left over is the gap your own savings need to cover. That gap, not the giant headline figure, is the number that actually matters to your plan. Let me show you what that looks like with a fairly typical case. Dave is 62, single, lives in Ontario, has $400,000 in his RRSP, and owns his home outright. He expects to spend about $45,000 a year once he retires. If Dave starts CPP and OAS at 65, his statement shows an estimated $950 a month from CPP and $742 a month from OAS, for combined government income of $1,692 a month, or $20,304 a year. His shortfall is $45,000 minus $20,304, which comes to $24,696 a year. Using a 4% withdrawal rate, that shortfall means he needs $617,400 in savings to cover it on his own. Dave only has $400,000, so on paper, he is short by $217,400. But watch what happens if Dave waits until 70 to start both benefits instead. CPP grows by 42% for each year he delays past 65, and OAS grows by 36%. His government income jumps to roughly $2,358 a month, or $28,296 a year. His shortfall shrinks to $16,704 a year, which only requires $417,600 in savings. Dave already has $400,000. The gap that looked like $217,400 a few minutes ago is now down to about $17,600. Same person, same savings, same house. The only thing that changed is when he started collecting. I used to think you needed $1 million too. I remember running my own parents' numbers years ago and feeling sick about how far short they seemed. Then I actually laid their CPP and OAS statements next to their spending, and the floor turned out to be so much higher than I had assumed. That changed how I look at every retirement number since. But there is a hidden trap that can throw off a calculation like Dave's completely. Most retirement calculators gross up your income needs using your current working tax rate. In retirement, your effective tax rate is usually much lower than that once you account for things like the pension income credit and the age amount. Getting that one detail wrong can overestimate the savings you need by $200,000 or more. According to Statistics Canada's 2023 survey of financial security, the median RRSP, RRIF, and locked-in retirement savings for Canadian households aged 55 to 64 sits at $100,000. Not $1,700,000. Not even close. And yet most of those households are not falling apart in retirement. The reason is that CPP, OAS, and GIS are quietly covering more of the bill than most people assume. Life expectancy matters here too. Statistics Canada's life tables show a 65-year-old man today can typically expect to live into his mid-80s, and a 65-year-old woman can typically expect to live into her late 80s. That means a 30-year retirement is a realistic planning horizon for a lot of people, not a worst-case scenario. The good news is that CPP and OAS are indexed to inflation, so that guaranteed floor keeps pace with rising costs instead of losing value year after year. So, if the typical household only has $100,000 saved and might live 30 years past 65, how does that actually work without running out? The answer sits in that income floor again, plus something most people resist doing on purpose, which is spending down savings instead of guarding them like something precious that must never be touched. Spending down savings on purpose sounds frightening if you have spent 40 years being told to save more. That fear is exactly where the real trade-off shows up. Between dying with a pile of money nobody needed and running out while you are still alive to feel it. Chase $1,700,000, and here is what that usually costs you. Extra years at a job you were ready to leave. Constant background stress about a number that keeps moving, and often dying with a large pile of savings that nobody in your family knew what to do with because you were too afraid to actually spend it. Know your income floor instead, and the picture changes. Say you only have $400,000 saved, which is well above the $100,000 median, but still far under the scary headline number. At a 4% withdrawal rate, that gives you $16,000 a year from your own savings. Add that to a more modest CPP and OAS combination, say around $20,000 a year rather than the maximum, and you are living on close to $36,000 a year, most of it protected from market swings. That is not luxurious, but it is not running out either. The goal was never to hit one magic number and stop worrying forever. The goal is having enough real choices. With a solid income floor under you, you can work part-time if you want to, not because you have to. You can take the trip. You can say yes to your grandkids without doing math in your head first. Ask yourself honestly which outcome actually scares you more: 2 extra years at a desk you were ready to leave, or running out of money at 82 with grandkids you still want to help. But none of this holds up if the market drops hard in your very first year of retirement, right when you start pulling money out. That risk has a name, and it is the actual reason most people run out of money, not because they saved too little to begin with. Picture this. You retire at 65 with $400,000 saved. In your very first year, the stock market drops 20%. You are still withdrawing 4%, about $16,000, from a portfolio that just got smaller through no fault of your own. That timing problem is called sequence of returns risk, and it matters more than almost anything else in retirement planning. Without a clear income floor, most people panic in that moment. They stop spending on things they actually need. They sell investments at the worst possible time and lock in the loss. Some even go back to work out of fear, even though the underlying plan might have been fine all along. Now picture Dave again from earlier. His CPP and OAS already cover roughly $20,304 of his $45,000 in yearly expenses, which is close to half. That means he only needs to pull about $24,696 from his own portfolio in a normal year, and even less if he tightens his belt during a downturn. Because CPP and OAS already cover close to half of what he spends without ever touching the market, Dave can afford to just wait the crash out instead of selling in a panic. His income floor is doing the job of a shock absorber. This is not luck on Dave's part. When close to half of your spending is guaranteed and inflation protected, a bad quarter in the market does not force your hand. You do not need to react to news you cannot control, because the crash cannot touch the part of your income that is already secured. So you have the floor, and you have a plan for a bad year. But there is one more thing that stops most people from ever running these numbers in the first place, and it has nothing to do with math. Here is how you actually build your own number in 4 steps. Step 1, get your real CPP and OAS estimates. Log into your My Service Canada account. Your CPP statement shows your estimated monthly benefit at 60, 65, and 70 based on your actual contribution history, not a generic average. Your OAS amount depends on how many years you lived in Canada after turning 18, with 40 years of residence needed for the full amount. Step 2. Calculate your income floor. Add your CPP estimate to your OAS estimate. If your total annual income excluding OAS is projected to land under $22,512 as a single person, you will likely also qualify for GIS on top of that, which can add over $1,000 a month. Canada.ca has a retirement income calculator that will walk you through this using your own real numbers instead of assumptions. Step 3. Get honest about your expenses. Most retirees end up spending somewhere around 70% to 80% of their pre-retirement income, not less. Do not forget healthcare. A recent survey of retired Canadian boomers found that roughly a third say health-related costs are pushing their monthly expenses higher than they had planned for, and close to half are managing an ongoing chronic condition. Build in some room for that, because provincial health coverage does not pay for everything. Step 4. Calculate your shortfall and the nest egg it requires. Take your expected expenses, subtract your income floor, and that is your shortfall. Divide that shortfall by 4% to get the lump sum you need to cover it. If your current savings already clear that number, you are ahead of where you thought you were. If they fall short, you have real options, including delaying CPP or OAS, or working part-time for a couple more years. There's one detail that trips up almost everyone doing this math on their own. If you gross up your income needs using your current working tax rate, you will overestimate what you need, sometimes by $200,000 or more. Once you retire, your effective tax rate is usually far lower, thanks to things like the pension income credit and the age amount. Use a realistic retirement tax rate somewhere around 15% instead of the 30% range you might be paying while you are still working, and the whole picture gets a lot less scary. Drop a comment with the retirement fear that keeps you up the most. I read every one, and I will build a future video around the questions that come up the most. I have been there too. I remember staring at my own CPP statement years ago and thinking, is this really going to be enough? It was once I actually understood what the floor was covering. Most Canadians never actually run this calculation, and it is not because they are lazy or bad with money. It is shame. There is a quiet fear that once you do the math, the number staring back at you will confirm that you have failed, so it feels safer to just not look. That reaction is completely normal. Brains are wired to avoid pain, and an unopened statement cannot hurt you the way an opened one might. But the shame here is built on a number, $1,700,000, that was never actually meant to describe your life. Once you see your real income floor, most of that pressure lets go on its own. Try shifting the question you are asking yourself. Instead of asking whether you have enough, ask what your income floor actually covers. That turns an overwhelming mountain into a staircase you can walk up one step at a time, which is a completely different feeling to sit with. It also means you are no longer grading yourself against a number that had nothing to do with your actual life in the first place. I will admit something. I avoided pulling up my own CPP statement for the better part of 6 months, purely because I was afraid of what it would say. When I finally opened it, I realized I had spent half a year being afraid of nothing. You have the real numbers now, and you have a different way to ask the question. What is left is one last reminder that should keep you from ever falling back into the $1,700,000 trap again. $1,700,000 is a scare number, not a plan. Your real retirement number starts with your income floor, the CPP, OAS, and GIS payments added together. Subtract that floor from what you actually expect to spend, and the gap left over is what your own savings actually need to cover. For most Canadians, that gap is a lot smaller than the headline number ever suggested. Nobody hands out a trophy for dying, with the biggest account balance sitting untouched. The whole point of decades of work was the freedom waiting on the other side of it, not a figure frozen on a screen you never actually spend. If you want to walk into retirement with confidence instead of dread, hit subscribe. I will keep breaking down the real numbers that apply to your actual life, not the version built to grab attention. You are not behind, and you are not a failure. Plenty of people your age are carrying the exact same worry in silence, and most of them have never once run the numbers you just walked through. You now know what your floor actually looks like, and that changes the whole conversation. Go check your CPP and OAS statements this month. You might already be a lot closer than you thought.